Hey, this $100 million sales playbook has actually added at least $1 million in sales leaks.
A lot of money.
So $1 million in revenue to over 32 sales teams. I want to go through it for you because you can use this playbook in your sales team, in your business. You could use it this week. You can implement these things this month and you'll start to find more revenue and more sales where the sales leaks are. And I'm actually going to walk through 4 of the core components to this playbook. If you stay for number 4, you'll also see how the 4th one really ties this all together.
I have a little surprise.
And you'll find it interesting how you think you're doing a lot of these things, but some little tiny tweaks you add or adjust in each of these buckets is where you're gonna start to find these leaks. Hopefully this helps you. I'm gonna get right into the video. This playbook has generated over $100 million plus in sales.
You said that already.
Teams. So the first is actually your lead management. Now, what do I mean by lead management? However you're doing lead generation, whether you're running marketing in like paid ads like on Meta or pay-per-click, or you're doing affiliate marketing and you're paying affiliates, or you're doing cold outbound, you're paying for lists and you have an outbound team that you pay to generate appointments. You have lead management. And what I noticed is there's some things that do not happen that need to happen when it comes to lead management. The first one is always obvious, which is your speed to lead, but this actually needs to be under 2 minutes. And so how do you actually, are your leads being called in under 2 minutes? And is that something that you're tracking, which we'll get to in data here in a second. But what we would typically do is if Meta is where you're driving leads, they go into your CRM, which then maybe you have a dialer. Look, if you don't have setters and closers, like you don't have multiple people to your sales organization, that's okay. Someone should be doing it.
Can I count on you?
Because this is one of the biggest levers that we see when it comes to fixing leaks. And so whether you have a full cycle salesperson who does both the outbound and the closing, or you have setters and closers, there needs to be a system where these get queued always to the top. And so let's say I've got my bank of leads and your P1, which is your new leads, they get dropped into the dialer, right? And so they're dropping like this. You want to filter based on fewest attempts at the top, and then obviously newest. So you have 2 filters in place. The newest lead that's been contacted 0 times gets queued to the top of your dialing process or your CRM. And then you need to have some sort of notification like Slack, for example, is what we'll use. So that way, if this salesperson they've cleared out new leads and now they're down here in P3, and maybe they're reactivating old leads, which I'll talk about in a sec, they should get a notification where like, boom, a new lead just came in. Pause what you're doing in priority 3, jump back into your priority 1 list, dial that new lead right now. And then what you can do is you can recycle those leads every 2 to 3 hours, because what we're trying to do is achieve 10 plus contact attempts in the first 4 to 5 days, right? So we're getting 2 or 3 attempts per day once the lead comes in, because I've noticed that the average number of contact attempts before an appointment gets booked is actually somewhere around 8. So if you guys are on average contacting leads 3 times, it makes sense where you might have a sales leak and you're not getting enough sales appointments because you're just not contacting leads enough. But then you're like, well, why aren't my people contacting leads enough? Well, the system, right? The lead gets driven into the CRM. It gets filtered based on contact attempts and age of the lead. That goes into your dialer software. And then you have a clear order, right? P1, P2, P3, P4 for your salespeople to know where they should be clearing leads out. And then you have that recycling system in place, right? So after that 1 contact attempt, it gets recycled out of that list and it can go into a receiving folder like a bank. And then after that 2-hour period, it gets recycled back into that P1 campaign. So managing leads for that speed to lead is highly important because you want to achieve that 8+ contact attempts. But obviously the booking rate goes up when you contact them in under 2 minutes, right? They just clicked the ad or they just engaged with your marketing. So now the pain point, the awareness is the highest. Of course, that's when you're gonna wanna contact them. So having lead management like that in place. And so the way we structure this lead management is you go new leads as your P1, P2 then is your no-shows, right? So the closer disposed that appointment as a no-show, they didn't show up to the appointment. Well, that then triggers into the dialing system or into that lead filtering list so that your salespeople know who's a no-show right now that just got marked a no-show. We get them on the phone, reschedule them, get them back on the calendar, and then do a proper tie down, ask a couple of questions of discovery to get problem awareness back on the table, because there is a transaction happening here, it's just not with money yet, right? The transaction is time. If I book an appointment and I'm booking a 30-minute appointment, I'm saying yes to 30 minutes of my time with you. But if I feel like my time is valuable, because you do B2B, and you're trying to talk with CEOs or founders, and they have an idea of like, hey, my time's pretty valuable. I don't want to waste a bunch of time booking all these calls and doing a meeting after a meeting. If they're saying yes to 30 minutes, their transacting time, they need to have a problem they know will be solved that they're going to get a clear answer for and clarity if I transact my 30 minutes with your team. And so that's why you would still want to have some problem awareness, some discovery at the setting side, because we want to seed that pain point with a solution to the pain point by booking this time and actually showing up. So that's your no-shows. And then P3 is your reactivation, which would be your old leads that never got booked, dormant leads that are now older than 90 days, etc. Right? We're trying to reactivate some of those old leads and get them back into the sales cycle. So that would be lead management. Now this leads into data.
And have the fun of doing math.
Because you should have a master dashboard like RevOps within your business. And if you don't, this is why you're feeling frustrated and you don't know what leak to fix or where the leaks are. There are some KPIs where you should see what happened yesterday, what's happening week to date, what's happening month to date, what's happening quarter to date, however you guys track, to know how your data is going. And so being able to track dials, connections, appointments booked, appointment completions, which are your shows, your conversions, and then your contract value and your cash value. Because obviously there's supposed to be a U in there. Yay. Because obviously you could be selling a $50,000 contract, but your time to cash with all that 50 grand, it might be a 2-year contract, so you have a 24-month time to cash. Well, depending on how you guys structure your sales and structure how you monetize your pricing, are we getting 30% upfront? There's a discount for paid in full. How many of these sales are paying in full or prepaying? You want to see what your cash value is. That way, you guys can see contact rate, right? How many of the leads did we get connected? Your connection rate. And we build these dashboards so that all this stuff can populate and you can clearly see your booking rate, right? So now we're starting to see all these are all percentages, right? Your closing rate, which I'm sure you guys track. But then what is your average cash at point of sale? And then LTV or contract value per new unit. And then the data is now telling you, okay, where are you guys at week to date, month to date? But also you can now predict revenue because you have a history of where these different fall offs are. And it's important to know like contact rate, which is what percentage of the leads do we engage and get some sort of disposition, right? We found out that they're not interested, they're disqualified, or they're bad data, right? But we at least got a hold of them somehow, some way on the phone, via email or via text, right? So if you're getting 80% contact rate, you're getting close to 20% pickup rate or connection rate. Now, the booking rate's gonna depend on your qualification, and basically, are you filtering and making it harder for leads to be a lead versus you're filtering through the sales process, in which case you're having to cut out some fat through engaging with the leads. So the booking rate's going to change more or less, but that's obviously what's going to dictate your cost per call, right? Because if your leads are, let's say, $10, and your lead efficiency, so the number of leads you book into appointments, let's say is 20%, which would be a good lead efficiency, well, then it takes me 5 leads to create an appointment, so your cost per call would be $50, right? But these are now leading indicators, right? Your contact rate and pickup rate are leading indicators that dictate that lead efficiency number. And I know I'm throwing a lot of data out there. There is a data sheet, and if you guys want help with that, you can comment below. I can give it to you. This is something that we set up with teams. You need to be tracking this data so you know where you're at week to date, month to date, to know if you guys are hitting your KPIs, okay? Now that moves us into quality control, because quality control is both having your quantitative data and your qualitative data. Quantitative data is just coming back to this data sheet. Hey, this rep is on KPI. This is their contact rate, their lead efficiency rate, their show up rate, their closing rate, etc. You know, they're at KPI. That's your quantitative stuff. But qualitative, because someone could have, like, they're under KPI, but why are they under KPI? Well, the qualitative would then be basically listening to these raw recordings, and you're like, well, gosh, I can't listen to every sales call in my company. Totally, I know you can't. But there's this little thing called AI, which I hear is pretty cool nowadays. And basically what you can do is you can use AI and you can have your transcripts go into a custom GPT. We set this up on OpenAI. Create a custom GPT, you put your RAG system in there, right? So your playbook, your knowledge base, what's our sales process, how do we score calls, right? You know, we give this score for doing proper frame, we do this score for doing proper discovery, we do this score for identifying the problem, we do this score for future pacing the solution, we do this score for the presentation, right? So you have your scoring rubric, and it goes through that scoring, the transcript goes through the scoring rubric, which then sends out a report on how that call went. So you could always reference the raw recording, but then it's going through your scoring rubric, which then goes to a Slack channel, and you can see your scores on every outbound set call and closing call that goes to that channel. And so now you have quality control. And basically the KPIs, your quantitative data, plus the qualitative data, the actual calls themselves, the communication, that then reinforces how you're going to train and improve your salespeople and get them better, which then leads us to the mystery number 4, right? Which is your training and management, right? How do we make this easy? Because I know this is a headache for most companies. And it's a headache because if you have even 1 or 2 guys or you have a big team, trying to make sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and checking in on everybody, it can feel a bit daunting and overwhelming. But now that you've got quality control with knowing how they're doing according to your sales process, that reinforces how you're gonna train and manage them. And the way that we've always structured this is you'll have a weekly L10. So if everyone's familiar with EOS, right, you basically have a level 10 meeting once a week. This is 90 minutes. And this is where you guys are doing your pulse check on each individual, how they're doing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, right? Are they in a good state? Do they feel conviction around the product or the program you're selling? Do they feel like the culture of the team is good? They feel like they're being led well, that leadership is healthy? You're doing that stuff. Pipeline management, how are they doing quantitatively with their KPIs according to the goals that you've set? all of that kind of stuff. And then your issues list, right? And talking through issues, you know, and that's where most things are discussed on this L10, all the issues. Hey, there's issues with some of the lead management and we need to clean up the CRM. Hey, there's some issues with how data is being tracked and all that. Hey, there's some issues with the sales process, it's actually not working. All that kind of stuff, you know, company-wide initiatives, etc. But then you have a weekly, what I would call power hour. And your power hour is just your hardcore role-playing, call reviews, right? So let's say you had a score, right? And if a score drops below 75%, then these are ones that we're going to review on the power hour for the whole team. So they all understand, not just the salesperson who messed up, but the rest of the team, hey, how can we do better? How can we fix this, right? And just drilling down on the script, role playing, getting the tonality right, asking the questions correctly. Hey, you're going off script. Here's the script again. You got to ask this question. You forgot that question. All that kind of stuff. And then honestly, this is simple stuff, but when you do it the right way and it's structured and everyone on the team knows their job, they know what's expected, they know what to do, there's transparency and accountability, then you can grow your sales. And there's so many leaks here already, and we're not even talking about adding more bodies, we're not talking about getting better talent, we're not talking about increasing the ad spend or the marketing to get more leads in the door now. We're not even doing those things yet. We're just fixing the system first. So if this was helpful, I need your validation so I can sleep tonight. Please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. And then I've got other videos on how to fix no-shows, how to recruit, how to train. I've got all sorts of stuff. Check it out, and I'll see you on the next video.
You said that already.